The autumn of 1818 brought death to the Ohio River Valley. In a log cabin near Pigeon Creek, Indiana, Thomas Sparrow clutched his stomach as violent spasms seized his body. His wife lay beside him, her face pale as creek water, tongue swollen and white. The sickness had found them 3 days after they'd finished the last of their summer butter. The symptoms attacked without warning. First came the burning in the gut, then tremors that started in the fingertips and spread like wildfire through the limbs. Victims vomited until nothing remained but bile. Their breath turned sour, reeking of acetone. Strong men who could fell trees from dawn to dusk suddenly couldn't lift a cup to their cracked lips. Across the frontier, the pattern repeated. Entire families collapsed within days of each other. Children, orphaned overnight, wandered between cabins searching for adults still breathing. In one Kentucky settlement, 23 graves appeared in a single October. The freshly churned butter hardened on tables while the fever consumed its makers, their bodies contorting in agony no frontier medicine could ease. The tremors that seized the Ohio farmer spread like wildfire through the valley settlements. Within days, his wife clutched her stomach, bile staining her nightgown. Their nearest neighbors, the Hendersons, found them both dead, their bodies twisted in final agony. Word traveled fast. Whatever killed them was spreading. Entire homesteads fell silent. The Millers abandoned their claim after burying 3 children in a week. Their cabin door swung open in the wind, revealing an overturned chair and a half-eaten meal. Settlers whispered of cursed ground, of poisoned wells, of vengeful spirits punishing their intrusion into virgin forest. The disease struck without pattern. Strong men collapsed in their fields. Nursing mothers died clutching their infants. Some families fled at the first sign of sickness, loading wagons in darkness. Those who stayed burned sulphur in their hearths and hung horseshoes over doorways, desperate remedies against an invisible killer. The same tremors that shook farmhouses across Indiana now seized the Lincoln cabin near Little Pigeon Creek. Nancy Hanks. Lincoln's fingers clawed at her rough wool blanket as violent spasms racked her body. 7 days earlier, she'd complained of a burning tongue. Now her muscles contracted in waves, each convulsion stronger than the last. 9-year-old Abraham pressed himself against the cabin wall, watching his mother's face contort. Her neighbor had brought fresh milk that morning, sweet cream meant to soothe her raw throat. The white liquid pooled at the corners of her mouth, mixing with bile. She couldn't swallow. The milk they'd forced between her lips now stained her chin like paint. Thomas Lincoln gripped his wife's shoulders as another seizure bent her spine backward. Her breath came in short gasps, each exhale weaker. Abraham counted the seconds between them. 8, 12, 20. On October 5th, 1818, Nancy Lincoln's chest stilled. The boy who would become president stood frozen, the smell of sour milk filling the cramped cabin. The cabin door burst open as Dr. Samuel Matthews staggered in from the dying woman's bedside, his leather satchel spilling glass vials across the dirt floor. Behind him, the widow Harrison writhed on her corn-husk mattress, her jaw locked in a grimace that exposed bleeding gums. The physician's hands trembled as he reached for his mortar and pestle, crushing willow bark and bloodroot while muttering Latin prayers he'd learned at medical college back east. Steam rose from the iron pot as Matthews added sulphur powder and dried foxglove to the bubbling mixture, the acrid smoke stinging his eyes. Through the window, he glimpsed 3 more neighbors approaching on horseback, their faces drawn with the same telltale pallor. The local preacher insisted demons haunted the creek water. The midwife blamed miasma rising from the swampland. Matthews's tincture of mercury and opium had failed on 6 patients already this week. The widow's son pressed a cup of fresh milk to her lips, hoping to soothe her burning throat, unaware he was feeding her more poison. Her pupils contracted to pinpoints as the tremors seized her spine, arching her body off the straw tick. Matthews watched his patient's pulse flutter beneath paper-thin skin, counting the erratic beats until they stopped entirely, his remedies as useless as the wooden crosses multiplying in the settlement's cemetery. While pioneers buried their dead across the frontier, Cincinnati physician Daniel Drake hunted for answers in his cramped office overlooking the Ohio River. His fingers traced columns of deaths, Indiana, Kentucky, Illinois, each entry marked with the same horrifying symptoms: the tremors, the burning stomach, the white vomit that stained bedsheets black. Drake's quill scratched across paper as he mapped the outbreaks, searching for patterns in water sources, soil types, weather conditions. Nothing aligned. The sickness struck rich bottomlands and poor hillsides alike, sparing one cabin while destroying its neighbor. His medical texts offered no guidance. No fever matched this profile. No poison created such specific agony. By candlelight, he dissected case after case: a child dead within days, a blacksmith lasting 2 weeks before succumbing. Some victims recovered partially, only to waste away months later. Drake's journal margins filled with desperate theories: miasma, mineral deposits, contaminated grain. But the evidence shattered each hypothesis. The killer remained invisible, methodical, and utterly inexplicable. While Daniel Drake's journal pages fluttered with theories of miasma and contaminated wells, frontier families began noticing a pattern that defied his medical explanations. The Johnsons in southern Indiana lost their milk cow 3 days before their youngest daughter collapsed. The Millers watched their prize heifer stagger and foam at the mouth just hours before the patriarch's hands started trembling uncontrollably. Sarah Miller pressed her palm against the cow's swollen flank, feeling the animal's labored breathing beneath matted fur. The beast's eyes had gone glassy, pupils dilated like black marbles. By sunset, the creature lay dead in the pasture. The next morning, Sarah poured the last of its milk into her husband's coffee cup, cream swirling thick and yellow. Across the frontier, the same grim sequence repeated. Cattle stumbling through clearings, their legs buckling like broken fence posts. Farmers dragged carcasses to burn piles while their wives strained fresh milk through cheesecloth. No one questioned why the cows died. No one wondered if the sickness might travel in that warm, white stream flowing from udder to pail to table. While neighbors carried empty milk pails from silent barns, Anna Bixby watched her own cattle stumble through the morning fog. The widow had buried her husband 2 autumns prior, not from milk sickness, but from a logging accident, leaving her to manage 40 acres of Indiana farmland alone. Her sharp eyes tracked the animals' movements as they grazed beyond the split-rail fence, noting which patches of vegetation they favored. 3 of her healthiest cows had sickened after breaking through a gap in the fence line. They'd wandered into the shaded forest edge where clusters of white flowers bloomed on knee-high stalks. Bixby found them there at dusk, their legs trembling, strings of saliva hanging from their muzzles. She knelt beside the plants, examining the toothed leaves and delicate flower heads that her cattle had stripped bare. The connection crystallized as she watched another cow nose toward the same white blooms. She yanked the animal's rope, dragging it back to safer pasture. These weren't the showy woodland flowers she knew, bloodroot or trillium, but something unremarkable, almost invisible in the forest understory. White snakeroot, the old-timers called it. A plant that thrived in shade, spreading its poison through every stem and leaf. The white snakeroot crushed between Anna Bixby's fingers released a bitter scent that made Dr. A.G. Sutton's nose wrinkle. Behind his modest laboratory shed in Springfield, Ohio, the physician prepared his grim experiment. A healthy goat bleated from its pen, unaware it would soon consume the very plant that had sent thousands to their graves across the frontier settlements. Sutton ground the leaves and stems into a coarse meal, mixing precise amounts into the goat's morning feed. Day 1 passed without incident. By day 3, the animal's appetite vanished. Its legs began to quiver, first barely perceptible tremors, then violent shaking that rattled the wooden slats of its enclosure. White foam collected at the corners of its mouth. The physician extracted fluid from the dying goat's tissues, filling glass vials with greenish liquid that caught the afternoon light. When he fed this extract to laboratory mice, they convulsed within hours. The poison concentrated itself in the animal's flesh and fluids, creating a deadly chain from plant to livestock to human. Sutton's hands trembled as he documented the proof. Dr. Sutton's goat lay dead on the laboratory floor, its muscles still rigid from the final convulsions. In Cincinnati, chemist John Rowe bent over his workbench, extracting the pale green essence from crushed snakeroot leaves that Sutton had shipped him. The liquid dripped slowly through filter paper, each drop potentially holding the answer to decades of death. Rowe isolated the crystalline substance through distillation, watching white needles form at the bottom of his flask. He named it trematol, from the Greek word for trembling. When he fed minute quantities to laboratory mice, their hindquarters seized within hours. The poison concentrated itself in fatty tissues, explaining why butter and milk became the deadliest foods on the frontier table. Under his microscope, Rowe traced the compound's journey, from the snakeroot's roots through the cow's 4 stomachs into the cream that rose to the milk's surface. A single cow could graze on snakeroot for days before showing symptoms, all while producing gallons of poisoned milk. 1 teaspoon of tainted cream contained enough trematol to kill a child within 48 hours. Dr. Sutton's published findings spread through medical journals and farming almanacs, reaching settlements from Ohio to Missouri. Farmers now walked their property lines with scythes and torches, hunting the white-flowered killer that lurked in shaded ravines. The plant that once grew unnoticed became the enemy, torn from the earth, piled high and burned in acrid bonfires that blackened the autumn sky. Split rail fences rose along every pasture edge, their weathered posts marking a new boundary between grazing land and untamed forest. Children learned to recognize the serrated leaves and clusters of white blooms before they could read their primers. Mothers kept vigilant watch over their milk pails, and the phrase "trembles in the cattle" could empty a church faster than news of Indian raids. Yet the scars ran deeper than cleared fields. Families who lost entire generations to the sickness passed down their grief like heirlooms, empty rocking chairs, faded daguerreotypes, and whispered warnings about the poison that once flowed white and sweet. The frontier had been won, but at tables across the heartland, a simple glass of milk would never again be taken without that flicker of ancestral dread.